Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Haj Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners.
Greetings to everyone. If this is the first time you're listening to our podcast, thank you for trying something new. I will reiterate, Ben and I are a pair of automotive journalists, but more important than that, we're very good friends. Isn't that right, Ben?
That's accurate.
It's more than accurate. Come on now.
More than accurate. That sounds like a tagline.
I mean, is anything more than accurate?
No.
No.
You can either be
It's
accurate or inaccurate.
Yeah.
More than accurate implies some kind of second sight, like a sixth sense for accuracy, and I can't speak to that.
Some people believe that there's a spectrum.
Let's not get into what
accuracy.
some people believe, Sammy. That is a slippery slope.
That is the voice of my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. You can find his work all over the internet. Ben, give him the scoop.
You can find my work at Motor Trend, at Haggerty, and at Inside Hook.
And those four publications are just four of many.
That was 3 publications?
Three.
I mean, if we're talking about more than accurate, we've already taken a step backwards.
Sorry, 3 publications and this podcast, of course.
Okay, sure.
And that pretty much sums up all over the internet, right?
Okay.
That's the up, down, and left and right of the internet.
Now I'm just dizzy.
And you can find my work all over the internet as well. You can find me at autotrader.ca, driving.ca, and Electric Autonomy Canada. Also, 3 publications in addition to this one.
Electric Autonomy Canada, totally a real publication, not a secret government agency. Don't worry.
Yeah. Make sure you have your cookies enabled when you visit that site.
Yeah, cookies.
This week we've got some cars to talk about. One car that I don't think we've talked about in passing in any way or form ever on the podcast.
Maybe
okay?
once.
You think so? This is I drove the 2024 Honda Prologue, which is the
Prologue or Prolong?
Prologue.
Which do you think is a better name?
They're prolonging something in the thing here, in the grand scheme of thing. Wow, I almost had a stroke right there.
Which do you think is a better name, Prologue or Prolong?
I think Prologue is a fine name.
That's not what I asked you. Which one's better?
Of those two, Prologue, yes. Because Honda came up with it and you came up with the other one.
But Prologue is the thing you do before the thing.
That's right.
And Prologue,
that's exactly what this is.
Prologue is a thing you do longer. Yes.
Now,
while you're already doing the thing.
The Prologue is an electric vehicle from Honda. It is their first mass market EV because they have sold some other electric vehicles in the past. They sold the compliance car Honda Fit EV way back.
I totally forgot that existed.
2012 or 2013 or something. And they also sold, I think, a Honda Clarity, but I don't think that was an all-electric vehicle. And a PHEV at some point as well. So this is their electric car. However, it's not entirely their electric car.
None of it, I would say, is their electric car.
There is some discussion here that they have some say in it. Okay. Now, what Ben is alluding to is the fact that the Honda Prologue uses General Motors Ultium technology. That's their battery and platform, and probably the motors as well from General Motors, which means that their first step into the mass electric market is done with serious hesitation.
Okay, so more than just being Ultium technology, this is essentially a reskinned Blazer EV.
It's somewhere between a Blazer EV and an Equinox, I think, because the Blazer looks kind of cool, and I think it's got like an RS version or an SS version of it coming out, which will have lots of power. The Honda Prologue does not have that kind of they don't have that performance-oriented one coming. As far as I understand, the Acura ZDX or ZDX will feature all that horsepower from the GM electric portfolio.
Something else I noticed, a difference between Blazer and Prologue, is that the Prologue is either front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, whereas the Blazer is front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, and all-wheel drive.
Did they follow through on that Blazer promise of being really confusing?
I think they might have. I'm bringing up the Blazer, though, because I was supposed to drive one last week,
A Blazer or a
Yes,
Prologue?
a Blazer, and I was
Mhm.
unable to do that because it had multiple problems. It would not take a charge, and they had transmission issues. And then it went out the week after to a colleague of ours who ended up having the same problems with it. The
Okay.
Blazer has been a very bad launch for General Motors. The Ultium platform in general has had significant problems.
It's ups and downs. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking now, and I don't know if they made actually the front wheel drive version, but they are rear wheel drive for Chevrolet versus front wheel drive for Honda.
Yeah.
The Prologue, Sammy, did you have any problems with it?
I haven't had any problems with it, other than, just general issues that I have with vehicles when I'm test driving, and nothing technical, nothing worry, no bugs or glitches or something that stressed me out or stranded me somewhere yet. I've still actually got it for the rest of the weekend here, but knock on wood, so far it's been technically okay. But there is a lot to discuss with this vehicle because since it's developed essentially, I mean, as much as you want to call it a Honda, and as much as Honda says that they had their way with it, the interior of this vehicle is covered in GM stuff. Like, it feels like a General Motors product in almost every touch point of the vehicle, which I don't think is well, it's not bad. I mean, it's not that's not an awful situation to be in. But it just doesn't feel like a Honda, and I think Honda has its own design language in its cars in terms of fonts and designs of buttons or icons, and this vehicle doesn't have any of those.
So you're looking at like a General Motors infotainment system and gauge cluster and all that stuff?
The infotainment system and gauge cluster is Honda specific to in one very particular way. While the Blazer and General Motors, actually all of General Motors EVs, use this Android Automotive powered operating system, the Prologue also has, but where GM has decided that it won't offer smartphone projection technology like Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, the Prologue has both of those features and wirelessly connected as well, which is a bonus in the Honda compared to the GM products. At least I think so.
Well, and the one Cadillac is still offering it as well.
Excellent.
I had
in
that
the Lyric.
In the Lyric, yeah.
So other parts of the vehicle, though, if you notice, like, let's say the way the window icons look, or on the window
icons?
switches. Yeah, when you look at a window switch, it's got like a little logo on it.
I just pushed the
icon.
switch, man. I'm not.
Yeah. That, and same with like the child safety locks button, and the way you operate like the wipers and gear select is also like familiar to a Honda product. You have to, it's like an electric gear stick on the steering column. You have to pull and push down to initiate a gear. And I don't think that's the case in the CRV or Civic. I think those have more traditional feeling and looking gear selectors.
My real question is, why has Honda had to do this? Where is their own in-house EV?
Where is their own in-house EV? I believe it's in Japan and Europe, and not fit for our market.
What
they used
makes
to have
it not fit for our market?
Well, I believe they used to have a vehicle called the Honda E, and it was a gorgeous-looking retro-styled EV that, you know what, honestly, when looking at this, it reminds me a lot of the way that Hyundai approached the Ioniq 5. But this vehicle only had a 37 kilowatt hour battery, so it was more or less a compact car. While this is a larger vehicle, it's sized somewhere between. It's actually in terms of length, it's a little bit longer than the Honda Passport, which is to say it's a fairly large vehicle, and can fit me and myself in the back seat, right? Like, I can sit behind myself when I'm piloting this vehicle. So I think this is the main issue here.
Like, are you talking about the one in Europe? Is that the same as when you say the retro themed little hatchback? Is that like the N600 kind of?
Yeah,
like
that looking one.
Calling back to, I guess, all the way to the 60s when they had these, I guess, city cars, key cars kind of thing. So that's the only in-house Honda EVs that are out there.
Yeah, well, there's also these other Hondas that are built by GAC, like the Chinese automaker, GAC,
Okay.
GAC. GAC Honda is in terms of a joint venture or whatever you want to
And
call
I'm
it.
assuming that GAC, they're the ones who are developing the batteries.
Yeah, and this is an electric vehicle that I saw actually. It's got an awful name. It's called the ENP1.
Okay.
And I saw this all over the Middle East actually, where Chinese vehicles are becoming more popular. And there's apparently a new generation of it called the you won't believe this, ENP2
I thought it
that
was going to
just
be FNP.
which
That's
just
what I was going
came
for.
on sale. These are a little bit more larger looking vehicles, but again feature under 70 kilowatt hour batteries. So
So what's the
again,
appeal of this car to someone who is a longtime Honda owner? And then a second question, what's the appeal to someone who's never owned an EV or maybe never owned a Honda? What would make them choose this over an identical GM product?
yeah, there's not a lot that I would say makes the Prologue stand out. That's the biggest. This is the biggest complaint that I have with the vehicle. It is a Me Too kind of vehicle. It is essentially a copy and paste of a Chevrolet product, which makes it worse. So, would you rather, if you do have to get service, not that electric vehicles require too much service, but they do get software updates and stuff like that. Do you want Honda to be managing GM's software updates in their vehicles, or would you rather just go to the source and get it from GM, right?
Yeah.
The other issue that I have with it is that it doesn't drive particularly engaging. It's smooth, but steering is really numb, and it just is not engaging to drive at all. One of the main issues I think power is an issue. Front wheel drive versions of the car I think have 212 horsepower, while the all-wheel drive version has 288 horsepower, which isn't bad on paper, but this is a 5,000-pound vehicle.
Yeah, so it weighs more than a Jeep Grand Cherokee, right? And it's
Yeah,
got 200 horsepower. I mean, that's not
that's
impressive.
not lovely.
Which
The
one is
range,
yours?
I've got the all-wheel drive. It's called the Elite, I believe.
Okay.
I'll double check the name of this product.
Black Edition?
No, just Elite, regular Elite.
Okay.
288 horsepower and 333 pound-feet of torque. It gets up and goes. It takes about 6 seconds to get to highway speeds, which is decidedly slow in this kind of vehicle. Like an Ioniq 5 will do that in 5 seconds, right? A whole second faster.
I was about to bring up the Ioniq 5 because I think that the single motor Ioniq 5 has the same power as the dual motor Prologue.
Yeah, it's embarrassing, I think.
I'm going to double check that right now, but seeing that 288 really, it might be 225. I could be completely. Okay, so the dual power one is 320 horsepower and 446 pound-feet of torque. So that's a considerable jump over what Honda's offering in its own dual motor one.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the Mustang in its cheapest form is more powerful than this. I'm going to double check here.
So
264 horsepower in the rear-wheel drive version Mustang Mach-E. So what are we getting at here, right? Like
it feels like a placeholder. I mean, that's kind of how it comes across.
That is exactly the name of the vehicle, right? Prologue is the placeholder.
Prologue is not a placeholder. Prologue, we talked about this.
Is the beginning of the story.
It's the thing you do before you do the thing.
Sure. It's the beginning of the story.
Is when you do the thing longer. You're already doing the thing, but you're going to do it longer than you were supposed to, perhaps. Or maybe you surprise everyone by how long you do the thing.
How do they justify it, right?
I think that it's a compliance vehicle by another name. That's kind of like, do they have a
Can
mandate?
I tell you that the other problem I have with it is that this model in particular, the one I drove, is nearly 60 grand.
Okay.
Which feels kind of pricey.
It does. I mean, the Blazer, I'm looking at pricing right now, and it starts at 48. And
this one also starts at 48 with destination.
And that's all-wheel drive, though.
That's front wheel. The one I'm talking about is front wheel drive. So you're already at a disadvantage compared to the Blazer base to base.
And that's got to be something that Honda worked out with GM so they would not compete directly, right? They don't want to. There's also something called all-wheel drive for the Blazer, which is like $2 or $3 grand more. It's the next trim up. I don't know what that means. I don't know what all-wheel drive and all-wheel drive is. We're not going to get into that tonight because it's not necessarily, we're not talking too much about the Blazer. We're going to drive it eventually. It's on the books once it comes out of the shop, I guess. But this is, we talk a lot about compliance cars, which is when a car company, in order to sell vehicles in a certain market, builds a vehicle that meets standards that are exclusive to that market. So in
Mhm.
California, which is one of the largest compliance markets, although California laws are adopted by a lot of East Coast states as well.
Yeah, carb states.
Yeah, that
Or carb
California
laws.
Air Resource Board. So the big thing these days is zero emissions vehicles. You have to have them in your lineup. Honda obviously didn't have any of those. I don't think they were making their hydrogen fuel cell car anymore. So they had to do something. And we there's different ways to do compliance cars. You can just do what Mazda did, which is build a car that no one could really practically justify owning. We're talking, of course, about the MX 30,
Yeah.
which had 100 miles of range, I think.
Yep.
Something like that
Yep.
on its battery, and was very small and yet not inexpensive. That vehicle, I think, was exclusively sold in a handful of states where they had to sell it. So if you're going to do a compliance car, that's one way to do it. But it's hard to get mad at Honda for choosing their path, because this is a legitimate car that people could use on a daily basis. And
Yeah.
it's a bit expensive, and it's not great, but it's also not terrible. You know, it's
Exactly.
not.
This
They
is
didn't
exactly it. It
they
is
just
almost
churn something out. They made a partnership. They built a car that is something people could conceivably buy, and they meet the rules and regulations that they're trying to meet in the process. So I'm not upset about that.
sure. I mean, the pricing is right in line with its competition. Its performance seems a little bit sluggish, but the range is decent. You get the max is 296 miles on a full charge, which is on the two-wheel drive models, while the all-wheel drive models get 281 miles, while the Elite model gets 273 miles.
I'm assuming
getting
that's
just
a wheel size thing, probably, right?
yeah,
For the Elite.
21-inch wheels. On
Wow.
that.
No. Again, I say no. Like,
Okay.
please stop putting 21-inch wheels on electric vehicles. It is unnecessary and antithetical to the concept.
Yeah. I'm just unimpressed, right? Like, this is an electric vehicle by, you know, not even by committee. They took something off the shelf, they put their name on it. The design is super conservative compared to a Blazer, so maybe that's where they're hoping somebody might pay attention to them. I don't know if conservative design wins you eyeballs, but maybe it does.
It has some nice colors available too, which is nice.
And as I mentioned,
I did just say nice twice in a row. So
it does have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. It comes with what's that thing called? OnStar, which is interesting for a Honda product. You don't usually see
do
OnStar.
you hit the OnStar button and then they pick up and then they realize you're in a Honda and then the operator just cuts the line?
Annex, yeah.
Well, OnStar can be added to any vehicle. They actually offer it across any model.
Cool.
Yeah.
How?
I think there's like piggyback
app?
devices that
Oh,
you can
okay.
use, or they have an app. Yeah, I think there's an app that you can use. It's something I came across while researching OnStar over the last couple of months for a client. I was surprised. I didn't know that, but it's blossomed into this whole other thing.
And one of the other things I want to mention with the Prologue is that it comes with all the features that you'd probably look forward to in a new vehicle. I mean, this Elite version has head-up display, it has vented seats, it has heated seats, it has USB-C ports, it has all of the adaptive cruise controls and driver assistance features that work pretty well. The infotainment system is easy to get used to. It's got a wicked gauge cluster that has a navigation screen in it, which is, I always love that like virtual cockpit that shows you a Google Maps sourced screen, which is nice, and connects to your Android Auto as well, so you can see that information. So not all automakers like show Android Auto info on the gauge cluster, which I think is pretty cool.
So, wrapping up on the Prologue, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's something that you would recommend. Just more like, here's another option, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the major issues is availability, I think, for electric vehicles. A lot of people say that after the first, sort of batch of electric vehicles, that availability is getting difficult for new customers to get a hold of new cars. And the Prologue offers one more option that hopefully you can get before they run out. Not that they're limited supply or anything like that, but it just seems like that's the vibe I get when I'm talking to people who are looking at electric vehicle inventory. So this is another option. Would I recommend it over any of the competition? No, I really wouldn't. I think we've mentioned that the Ioniq 5 is probably best in class for us. I also like the Mustang Mach-E. Both of those vehicles have been out for a while, and it seems like most of the issues have been ironed out. Although I've been hearing of some pretty horrifying stories of bricked Mustang Mach-Es due to their 12 volt battery, and that's a problem to read.
What do you mean 12-volt battery? What's the problem?
Apparently they die, and then when that dies, it's no good. Like the car basically bricks itself.
Ouch.
Yeah, not good. So maybe I should stop talking about the Mustang Mach-E and go back to recommending the Ioniq 5 or the Kia EV6, which I think is built on the same platform, uses the same technology.
So I have a vehicle to talk about today that it was a bit of a surprise. I wasn't planning to drive this vehicle, but as I mentioned, the Blazer EV I was supposed to drive ended up being MIA. I drove home instead in the 2024 Cadillac XT4. This is a luxury crossover that we have not talked about on the show in almost 5 years, I think, since it came out. I don't remember much about my first time driving it. But I don't remember disliking it. I think,
Okay.
I don't know. So the segment that the XC4 finds itself in has exploded over the last 5 years. It's small, front-wheel drive based SUV-like things that are actually really hatchbacks, kind of riding tall. And we have the Lexus NX. We have Mini Coopers of all shapes and descriptions that are kind of like edging up in size to get into the compact segment, or
Right.
I guess subcompact segment is really where this vehicle finds itself. There's what else, Sammy, has there been that's new over the last little while? There's the X1, which just came out as a redesign, and the X2, which was redesigned at the same time. It's kind of like the XC40, which is a little bit bigger than those two options.
Yeah, I was thinking XC40
There's the GLB.
primarily. Oh yeah, GLB is funny because you can get it with a third row somehow.
Yeah, there's the GLA, which is like, again, kind of underneath this. There's the Q3. There's the Tonale from Toenail, or however you say that, from Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
It seems to be the place to be right now. If you're an automaker and you have a small platform or a platform that can be ensmallened and shrunk down to the size of a subcompact hatchback, you're going to sell one of these things. So Cadillac is in a way become the elder statesman of this field. And in recognition of that, the XT4 got its first refresh for 2024, which is the model I drove. The changes are not dramatic. It's mostly exterior styling, a lot of lighting stuff, a lot of LEDs. The interior is fairly upscale for the price point. It's got as with every vehicle these days, gauge clusters are going away, and big screens that kind of wrap around the whole dash are the new thing. So the Cadillac's got one of those too.
Yeah.
And it's running the new infotainment system that you mentioned, Sammy, the Android-based one.
Okay, yeah.
But it does allow, unlike the EVs from General Motors, this does allow Android Auto and Apple CarPlay.
That's great. Okay.
And other than that, though, not anything else has really changed. It's got the same engine. It's a 235 horsepower turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, 9-speed automatic transmission. What's kind of weird, though, about the XT4 compared to most of the other vehicles I just mentioned, it's front-wheel drive with selectable all-wheel drive. And it's selectable only in certain drive modes. So when you're in touring mode, which is like their version of normal mode.
Normal, yeah.
I don't know what Noring mode is. I mean, anyone out there who's listening knows what Noring mode is. Hit us up with your suggestions. I'd love to hear it. It's front wheel drive in normal mode, but if you go to sport mode, all-wheel drive automatically engages.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the intention of that is to dial out some of the torque steer and I guess improve overall handling. And so I tried it out, and when you floor it in touring mode or normal mode, it really does twist the steering wheel in your hands a little bit. It's got a decent amount of torque that's trying to put down to the ground. Let me find the actual torque figure specifically, because I mentioned the horsepower, but not the torque. It's 258 pound-feet, so it's not a ton, about the same as what you find in a Volkswagen GTI. But I put it to sport mode, and the all-wheel drive system does take most of that away from the situation. So it smooths things out. It does work. It's not particularly quick. It's like 60 miles per hour in like 7 seconds, which is fine, but it's not sporting. And I think there's a number of vehicles of its size that will beat it.
Mhm.
But it looks good. I would say that the updates inside and out have done a good job. I think it's an attractive looking vehicle. I think that if you're inside the cabin for $40,000, I think it actually starts at 39. You're not going to be disappointed. Yeah, 39,000, and it goes up to 43. You'll be in there and feel like you got your money's worth.
I think the main issue there is, I mean, the main advantage of this vehicle seems to be the pricing. I mean, that seems super attractive
sure.
and low for a luxury vehicle with space and with performance, with like a powertrain,
space,
right?
yeah, the space is normal-ish, but it's cheaper than a Mercedes. It's actually the same price as a smaller Mini Cooper, and it's cheaper than both the Volvo XC40 and the X1 and X2. Like it's actually starts at $2 or $3 grand less than those vehicles. So that's a big plus in its favor. The minuses, though, my vehicle was almost brand new. It had something like 3,000 miles on the clock. It had a horrendous vibration in the dashboard at all times. Like as soon as you were driving, just a brrr, like something was loose inside the dash, and it was constantly making a loud, off-putting sound. I do not think that when you buy a luxury car, you should be back at the dealership for that kind of noise within the first 6 months of ownership. More to the point, I do not think that a vehicle like the XT4, which has been on the market for many years, should be experiencing those kinds of build quality issues this far into its lifespan. Like that seems kind of crazy to me. And I mentioned the pricing in Canada, the United States. In Canada, it starts at 44,000 or 45,000 actually, and goes up to 52. So it's a little bit wider range, but that's still fairly reasonable for what it is. Sammy, have you driven a vehicle, a luxury vehicle, that had that kind of build quality issues in the last year?
I don't think so. I do think that I've driven a GLC in the past year that there were a lot of squeaks and but nothing that was super distracting. I mean, I think you'd have to, hang out with the audio completely off, and you'd have to be on some pretty choppy roads to hear that kind of frequencies, those kind of frequencies. So I'm not sure if this is something that's a byproduct of something, loose or squeaking or shaking or whatever it is. And whether or not that's something, I mean, is it possible to live with that kind of noise?
No, absolutely not. I would be at the dealership immediately, and I would be upset.
I mean, these cars are designed to be quiet, and I mean, even Cadillac wants vehicles to be super silent, especially when you're taking highway routes. It's not fair, you want something that sounds special.
Well, you don't want a loud buzzing sound like there's marbles in the dashboard vibrating at all times. The other area where the XT4 kind of falls flat, I guess, is it's not athletic whatsoever. Like,
really?
It's totally fine to drive, but it is not interesting to drive in any sense of the word.
Okay.
It doesn't feel big, which I liked, but there was at no point was I like, oh, let's go take the XT4 for a drive, or, oh, let's use sport mode. Like I had no interest in using sport mode. It does not bring anything to the picture. And I think that's okay, because most people who are buying a small, fake hatchback like this, they're doing it for practical reasons. They want the comfort stuff. They want the technology gear. It doesn't have, speaking of technology gear, it did not have Super Cruise, which is a little bit surprising.
Yep.
Especially since I drove a high trim version of the vehicle. But if you were to drive an X1 or an X2, you're probably going to have a more interesting time. Not a much more interesting time, but there will be a difference. I think that's balanced up by the interior in the Cadillac, which I think is actually nicer than the BMWs.
Okay, interesting.
That's the strength. I think design and styling is the strength of this automobile. The drivetrain is kind of a middle ground. And software is good, like the infotainment screen, the gauge cluster, all that stuff worked well, worked fine, no real issues. And the cargo space was okay. I did haul some stuff around. I had a whole bunch of stuff I needed to take to a donation bin from cleaning out my garage, and I was able to do that without any issues. So it's I think it's a decent all-around luxury option, but I'm really hesitant to recommend it because of the experience I had with that sound.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally valid. You can't be promising a luxury experience, a high-end experience, an exclusive experience, and have these kinds of noises or vibrations that really ruin the entire experience.
And
Right?
I want to call back to a couple of weeks ago. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. It might be even longer now. When I had the Cadillac Lyric, when we were talking about that.
Oh yeah,
And I had the same type of issue with vibrations. In this case, it was from the rear passenger area of the vehicle. But that was an even more expensive model. And I kind of chalked that up to the fact that it's on the Ultium platform they've been having so many problems with. I had that noise inside the cabin, and then I had the noise being generated up front, potentially by the front motor. I never got to the bottom of that. Cadillac wasn't able to tell me what that was. Or it also could have been the charging port door, which has been an issue for other reviewers. The main point is Cadillac does not seem to have its assembly down to the point where they can produce these vehicles that will stand up quality-wise to the competition.
yeah, absolutely. This is, but these things are what makes somebody want to get a luxury vehicle. If you can't execute on this, they're out of luck. Like there's nothing else going for them, right?
Yeah, it's not going to be saved by, as I said, the driving experience or anything.
Or the design or
the price.
Like
I mean, even for that price, I expect a level of quality that at least matches like a Toyota. You know, it's just. And here we go. We were having a lengthy discussion. Actually, that's all I have to say about the XT4.
Okay.
I want to go back to the discussion, Sammy, that you and I were having before the podcast. Sometimes we do the podcast before the podcast, which is a problem because we say interesting things and then we forget about them and then no one ever hears them except us or whoever is archiving our podcasts, our raw podcast files. Shout out to the ghost that lives in my house. But I just mentioned Toyota quality levels. Now, Sammy is of the opinion that Toyota has been coasting on its quality reputation for quite some time. And that's how they've been able, a big part of how they've been able to keep people in the fold. And we were kind of talking about that in comparison to, if you look at Toyota's lineup right now, they do not have that many outstanding vehicles for sale, despite then, or perhaps because having one of the widest, deepest lineups in the car business.
Yeah.
Sammy, what would you say are the outstanding Toyota products?
I think they've got a few, excellent vehicles. I think the Prius, I think the Corolla, the Camry, RAV4, all are outstanding.
You said Prius, Corolla, Camry.
Oh yeah,
RAV4.
And RAV4. I think maybe Highlander and Grand Highlander can be in there. I don't know if RAV4.
Do you?
No, I think the Telluride is better than the. Actually, you're right. I think the Telluride is better than the Grand Highlander. And then in terms of the Highlander, it's just good enough.
Okay. So you
there's
mentioned.
Also the.
Sorry,
yes.
go on.
There was also the RAV4 Prime, which I think doesn't get enough love.
It's the same. I mean, RAV4 is RAV4. I don't think we want to split things too much.
Okay. So I mentioned, 4 cars?
Yeah. Conservatively, they have 20 cars on sale?
Yeah.
They have a lot of cars. Oh, GR Corolla is also very good. Okay. But again, is that just another version of the Corolla? I guess we could kind of say, yeah, it's Corolla.
And I like their 86.
But is the
if we're talking about performance vehicles.
Is the 86 an outstanding vehicle?
No, because you can get another one at Subaru, I guess.
Well, or the Miata exists, which I think kind of steals its thunder a little bit. But yeah, I could give you the 86. So that makes 5?
Sure.
Now, on top of these vehicles, Toyota also has 2 cars or two automobiles that sell extremely well despite not being outstanding, and that's the 4Runner and the Tacoma. You can
4Runner and Taco, yeah.
Very easy to argue that the 4Runner is, in its current form, we haven't driven the redesigned 2025, but in its current form is a dinosaur. And
the 5-speed auto-equipped one?
Yeah, that one. And
4-liter V6
4-liter V6. Not a pleasant vehicle to own, yet it has so many fans. Tacoma, I think, is outclassed by what GM has brought to the table in the midsize pickup field. But again, huge built-in fan base. I'm about to drive the hybrid one in about a month. I'm looking forward to that. I have not taken that on yet. But for a company that makes as many vehicles as it does, it's rare for me to recommend them outside of what we just talked about. I mean, none of their pickups, none of their other SUVs, and none of their many small crossovers except for the RAV4. And we were trying to think of other car companies that how many vehicles do they offer that are really outstanding as a percentage of their lineup? And it turns out that there are car companies that have kind of pushed past Toyota in that sense. But we still refer to Toyota as this kind of paragon in the industry when it kind of feels like they have adopted a bit of a retrograde attitude certainly towards electrification, but also towards building products that are unique or offer something that the competition doesn't have. And we talked about it, I think, last week with the Land Cruiser, which was a real opportunity for them to break out of that mold. And yet we just ended up with like a warmed over version of what the 4Runner is going to be at a much higher price.
I mean, you take a look at an automaker that is huge. This is a huge automaker, and they have the vehicle lineup that supports it, basically. But the reality is, the bigger you get, I think, the more difficult it is to maintain success in every corner of that you enter, right? Look at the other automakers, small automakers like Mazda and Subaru. I think they have a slightly better hit rate because the vehicles the vehicles that they offer have to be good. Because they have to make money on everyone that they sell, and they have to be good at what they do, right?
Sure, I'd say, Crosstrek and the Outback are very, very good vehicles in their class.
I mean, Forester and Ascent are good at what they do because they're affordable and spacious, right?
Ascent is an anonymous 3-row crossover that I would not recommend over any other.
That's fair.
I would definitely recommend.
Like I said,
I would recommend an Outback over another vehicle.
Don't forget the WRX.
I have trouble recommending that.
Anyways, but when you took a look at the bigger automakers, we're talking about like Volkswagen or General Motors or Toyota. It seems like Toyota is having a moment. Like, it's really having a moment.
Toyota is okay with entering segments and not being competitive whatsoever. And it feels like, and this is why I bring this full circle. Sami, you saying that they have this reputation that allows them to sell volume, so they can still sell vehicles in a segment like Sequoia, where they're not competitive really at their price point, or something like the Venza or the Corolla Cross, especially, they are essentially placeholder automobiles.
They're just Toyota alternatives to other very good vehicles. Yeah. Right?
So will we see a change? Is Toyota okay with this process? I mean, this is a company that has already farmed out the Supra to a third party and doesn't seem to care about that, and has increased the price of the Sienna minivan to a fairly extreme degree, making it out of reach, I think, for a lot of families.
Those aren't the issues. I mean, the biggest issue is the reliability concerns. Having to recall every single, what is it, Tundra?
And the LX, I think, had that. Was it the LX?
Let me double check.
Whatever had that twin turbo V6.
And they've been recalling even more of these things, more cars lately. Is the bigger problem.
Yeah, this is a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I'd forgotten that was part of our discussion.
Because in the past, Toyota has built a reputation in a vehicle that would last you forever. The resale value would be excellent. And while they might have had recalls, the vehicles still managed to live for a very long time. They weren't serious problems. But now we've got like these engines that are falling apart.
It feels like careless assembly.
I think in the enthusiast side of things, we talked about Corolla GR, but from what I understand, they're not honoring people's warranties when things go wrong.
Yep, I've heard that as well.
And that happened with the GR86 as well, I think.
Yes.
So these are a number of little missteps. I think engines that are not safe or not reliable, that need a complete replacement, is a bigger misstep. I mean, it's great that they're trying to fix that problem.
But it's a very preventable problem by having an assembly line that does not allow foreign materials to enter into the engine while it's being built, so that it can clog oil passages or whatever later on.
Tundra and LX engines, about 100,000 of them, which is a lot.
That is a lot. That is a lot of customers who may not buy a second Toyota or Lexus. Now, Sami, is the solution... So it almost feels like Toyota just has its fingers in too many pies, has kind of taken its eye off of the quality marker, and is mostly pushing volume. You look at a company like Honda, which isn't in nearly as many areas,
Okay.
as Toyota. Is that the answer? Is that what Toyota should be doing? Or is Toyota going to be able to keep making money even as they at the expense of their reputation? Like where does the, there's two lines on a graph, and one of them is the
Yeah.
dollars going up and the other one is the reputation going down. And when they meet,
Yeah.
like what happens?
Yeah, I think that's a real concern. I think that's a real concern. I think they are having that kind of intersection is eventually going to catch up with them if they keep trying to enter a bunch of different markets, trying to offer, I don't know if they're not gimmicks, but like white space filling vehicles.
Like the Corolla Cross is a great example.
Yeah.
It's a nothing vehicle from a conceptual standpoint. It just fills a hole in a showroom.
Other ones like the Crown. Remember the Crown?
The Crown is a great example of a weird idea that
is okay. It's an okay car,
it's
but nobody wants it.
Yeah,
nobody
who is
needs
it for?
Right?
And it replaces a car that had a built-in audience, although an audience that was graying and dying, which I guess is not the best place to be. But I'm looking
there
at
are other automakers that have a ton of product too. I think Hyundai has a lot of vehicles, but they seem to have
far
a
less
better.
than Toyota.
Yeah, and nobody. I don't think maybe BMW has as many as Toyota, but
Or Porsche has as many 911s as Toyota has total product.
But they have a more consistent delivery of their product, right? Like but then again, maybe this is what it is, right? Like I said this to you, I think Toyota is entering this phase where they have to revamp a lot of vehicles in a short period of time. It might be because those products are getting really, really aged, or they have technology in them like engines or powertrains that are no longer viable or competitive in this market at all. But I think maybe Hyundai has made that shift where all of their vehicles have this 1.6 turbo, they have this hybrid powertrain, or this regular 2-liter engine. So now they've got something a little bit more modern that's spread across their entire lineup, while Toyota is now trying to catch up to everybody in terms of powertrains, in terms of platforms, in terms of in-car technology, after being so far behind on a couple of those aspects. And they're okay with that because it meant that their vehicles were fairly reliable, they're predictable, and people were comfortable with them, right?
So I think that when I kind of look at the philosophy as well of the lineup, it would have made a lot. I feel like, we're talking about filling white space. I think Grand Highlander is maybe the most successful white space filler that they've come out with, because a legitimately 3-row adult-sized crossover SUV is a good idea. But then you look at the lineup that also has the Sequoia in the same spot, where it's a truck-based version of that concept that nobody wants. They sell like 20,000 a year of the new one. The year before that, they sold 5,000 of the old one. You look across the aisle at the GM dealership. GMC sells like 4 times as many Yukons.
But do they sell as many Traverses? I mean, the Traverse, I don't know.
I don't know, but what
if you want to compare Traverse to Highlander,
I'm not saying
Grand Highlander.
I'm saying Grand Highlander is a good idea. Yeah. Sequoia is not. I don't think Traverse sales enter into it there. But I just think that Sequoia is barking up a tree that no one is interested in discovering. Like people aren't turning to Toyota for a body on frame tow vehicle that has 3 rows, and yet they're in that segment, and they'll continue to be in that segment for whatever reason. Like that vehicle,
but they're in the segment with 2 vehicles. Same thing with the Land Cruiser. They're in a segment with 2 vehicles, 2 options.
And the Sequoia's pricing is so much higher than the Grand Highlander too, which is like Land Cruiser and 4Runner. It's a good point.
So I mean, I don't know if they're just trying to figure out their market, or if they just want everybody to have a Toyota, no matter how good or how bad the vehicle is, right? Like,
and that's not good for long term. Like, throw aside the quality. If you have a Corolla Cross, do you really want to upgrade to a RAV4? Because it's not great, it's not terrible, but it might give you
the RAV4 or the Corolla Cross.
The Corolla Cross.
Yeah,
it might not make you want to stay in the Toyota family. You might be like, you know what? I'm intrigued by the styling of a Mazda CX-50, or I'm intrigued by the warranty that I get with a Hyundai, or I'm intrigued by the fact that I can get an electric vehicle from Hyundai that I can't get from Toyota. It just opens up all these. When you're not beguiling the entry level, then you're kind of giving away a lot of brand goodwill that you could have put to work in building a long-term relationship with a customer. Anyway,
Yeah,
I don't
I
sell
think
cars for a living, so maybe
no,
I'm
I
wrong.
know. But I also think like there's just different approaches to how a vehicle is presented. I think that sometimes there's a vehicle that is desirable, and then there's a vehicle that is the backup option. And I think that the Corolla Cross, unfortunately, is for people who couldn't get themselves into a RAV4 for whatever reason, and they had to drop back into a Corolla Cross because they needed a crossover still. They wanted something that was fuel efficient, and budget friendly, and that's what they found themselves into. I don't know if they'll eventually upgrade from a Corolla Cross into a RAV4, but
And like,
I think they wanted a RAV4 but couldn't get one.
and like Venza is for people who wanted a RAV4 but wanted to spend $8,000 more
For no reason.
for no reason.
But they didn't want it to look like a RAV4. That's what they wanted.
Well, I guess it's only $4,000 more than the RAV4 hybrid, and I know the Venza's hybrid only. So
It's just such a bizarre lineup. And I mean, like I said, I forgot to mention this in our preamble, our pre-podcast preamble. BMW has a huge lineup. If you've ever seen how many cars BMW sells,
huge lineup, small volume.
which is also weird.
But it's because they are the only independent car company left. So BMW has to be in every niche to soak up as many potential sales as they can. That's their whole thing. They only have so many platforms that they can afford to develop, so they need to wring as many dollars out of those platforms as they can. I get that strategy, but Toyota is not in that position. Mm-hmm. You know, they could make that's what's always frustrating me. They could make an amazing full-size pickup, for example, and yet we get the Tundra, which has failed to innovate in its most recent generation and is a backup, a fallback. You know, you'll drive it and you'll be like, it's not terrible, but I can't really see a reason why I'd pay more for this or why I would choose it over the competition.
But maybe we're failing to see just how, like the Sequoia is built on the Tundra. They're making Tundras no matter what. I don't know if they're selling all their Tundras, but they're making the Tundra and they're using the Tundra technology. And then same with the Land Cruiser and 4Runner, which I think are built on Tacoma technology and platforms and powertrains. So to them, they're like, this is easy. We can just make these cars.
Yeah, why not make them good though? It's not like
they don't want to make them good. They just want to make they want to make something easy. They think, having more options in the dealership is good enough.
Let's flash back to the 80s.
Yeah.
When General Motors had a very similar philosophy, except they expressed it via rebadging. So you would have one vehicle that would be sold by Pontiac, Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, and Buick. And it would be
too many badges. Yeah.
It would be essentially the same vehicle, so platform, but it would look slightly different. It would have different price points, and maybe some of the features would be the same. That strategy did not work out for General Motors in the long term.
Okay.
It actually hurt a lot of their brands. So I feel like Toyota has already hurt the Land Cruiser brand with the current Land Cruiser, and I don't think you can really hurt the Corolla Cross or the Venza brands because I don't think they're really strong. But the Highlander was a brand they were able to strengthen with the Grand Highlander, but the Sequoia was certainly not strengthened by the new model. So
I'm worried about the Highlander. I'm worried about the actual Highlander name because I think that the world is not. I think they're going to do something bizarre to it. I think they're going to make the next Highlander.
They already have the crown for the bizarre stuff. Like that's where that's all going to go.
I don't think there's going to be a replacement Highlander. I don't know. I'm fine, babe. I'm feeling something weird.
That is super weird.
The Grand Highlander is everything the Highlander should have been.
Okay.
And that leaves you wondering what the Highlander is.
I think the Highlander is up against stuff like the Pilot and the Pathfinder.
Yeah. And those are like critically. I mean, the good thing about Highlander is that it sells really well.
Sure.
But the Pilot, I don't think does.
No, but the Highlander also comes in a very fuel efficient hybrid, which I think makes a real difference.
Yes,
who knows? Maybe Honda will come out with the Pro Pilot, and it'll be really big.
The Pilot Pro. Anyways, it is interesting to step back and think about the automakers as a whole, and what they offer and why they're offering what they do, because sometimes it's baffling. Like it really is.
Sammy, do you think it's called the Honda Prologue because it's a prologue to them actually building their own EV?
Yeah, I do think so. Apparently, their real EV is supposed to come out in 2026, which
they couldn't wait 2 years.
Who knows if the world doesn't end by then? But what are they? Are they learning something from GM and Ultium right now?
I think
And
they're
is
learning
that thing?
some not to do
Yeah,
things
is
about
that
Ultium.
thing how to deal with glitches? Is that thing how to deal with packaging and performance? Is that thing um, pricing? Right? Like something's not right here, and I don't know what they're going to. I don't know what to expect in 2026. You and I have been really like adamant that electric vehicles right now are in a safe spot because they all do more or less the same thing and they offer around the same amount of range and they are all capable of fast charging, but
Yeah,
they
not a
all
lot of
have this,
outliers, I guess, that's a good way to put it.
and they don't the poison pill that they have is they can be kind of they're all priced around the same and can be a bit of a leap of faith for an EV hesitant buyer to jump into, I think. So we're curious when the affordable EVs are really going to not only arrive but be as good as the other mainstream ones, like the Ionic. Like a Kona EV is good. Is it as good as an Ionic 5? No,
No,
no.
but I mean, we had that affordable EV from in the form of the Bolt, and they took it away from us. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I was looking at the Fiat 500e,
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and it's
Tell me about
150
this.
miles, 150 miles of range, and
Yeah.
it's priced at I think like 32 or 33. And you're looking at this and thinking, okay, that's not expensive for an EV. And then you look back at what the Bolt was costing. It was like 26
Yeah.
or something. And it had another 50 or 60 miles of range on it.
Yeah,
At least.
at
If not 100 more.
I think it had 100 miles more
And
range.
it's like, and the people are like, oh, you know, the 500e, it's relative, it weighs like under 3,000 pounds and it's fun to drive. The Bolt was not that heavy or that big. You know, that vehicle existed. GM owned that market and then wiped their hands and walked away so they could focus on Ultium. And I think we're really going to look back on that as a huge mistake for them. I don't
While
know.
somebody else gets, while another automaker gets that
Yeah, and
formula
it's not
right.
going to be
They
Fiat.
they must have been losing tons of money on every single one. Like
Oh,
they must
man.
have. It's the only way that I would understand it. Or they saw this plan of things needing to be, maybe they have a lobbying plan in action where things need to be built in America in order for them to sell without tariffs or taxes.
Or maybe
something
there
like
was
that.
like a really ugly portrait of the Bolt in the attic, and every time they made a Bolt, it got older and uglier, and they're like, oh, we have to burn this portrait. We can't keep doing this. All right, if you want to burn a portrait, or send us a portrait, or paint a self-portrait, you can get in touch with us and talk about all of those things. There's a few ways you can do that. We love hearing from you, and the easiest way is probably on the website itself. Unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. There's a contact form. You fill it out, you click submit, and it ends up in our inbox. If you are uninterested in the web, which I understand, you can find us on social media. We are both on Instagram because Sami has finally rejected X/Twitter. He is at Sami_ha, like you're laughing. You can find me at Hunting Benjamin, or you can even email me the old-fashioned way, Benjamin at benjaminhunting.com.
While you're over at our website, I really encourage you to subscribe to our podcast. There's a bunch of buttons at the top of there that you just click, and it takes you to your favorite podcast client and subscribes for you, which is really cool. And why don't you tell your friends about us? Share it, leave a review. That really goes a long way. Ben, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, I'm going to be talking about the redesigned Ford Mustang GT.
And what I want to talk about next week is the conclusion of one of my favorite automotive events every year, which is Monterey Car Week. So there's a lot of crazy things that happen at Monterey Car Week, and I really want to run them by you and see if they're as interesting as I think they are, or if they're just fake news for rich people.
All right. Thank you for listening, everybody.
See ya.